Art was about to head inside the carriage, he saw Fairith there. Fairith asked who was with them and inquired if Art had been kicked out of the kingdom. Art asked who the boy was. Fairith shouted that he was the noble Art had beaten unfairly by defying the customs of the duel. He explained that everyone but a foolish human like Art knew a real duel was meant to be a demonstration of magic, with the challenger always striking first. Art recalled a bit about Fairith. Fairith introduced himself as the heir to the noble Ivesar family and mentioned that while he might have been defeated underhandedly when he was a naive child, if they were to fight now, things would be different. Just then, Art grabbed Fairith's hand and told him it was nice to meet him, apologizing for bullying him in the past. As Art sat there, a girl told him that he could call Fairith Fife as they all did. Fairith responded that she didn't need to tell Art that. While talking and travelling, they arrived in the human world. Art looked outside, thinking that this was the place where his parents were living, the floating city of Xeris. He walked through the market and reached a mansion. He said to Sylvie that they were finally home and asked if she was ready. He then knocked on the door and thought about how he had nearly died, lost someone important, killed and trained for his life, but now wondered if those things were as nerve-wracking as this moment. As he knocked, someone replied that they were coming. Art thought it sounded like a young girl's voice. Then a lady opened the door and asked how she could help him. Art bowed, greeted her, and introduced himself, mentioning that he had heard his family was currently residing in this manor. Just then, Art saw a small girl who was curious about the visitor. Alice, carrying some food, came by looking for Eleanor and found her at the gate. She asked Eleanor why she mentioned getting everyone who knocked at the door. When Alice saw Art at the gate, the food fell from her hands. Art asked if Eleanor was his sister. Becoming emotional, he then told his mother that he had come back. Overcome with emotion, Alice rushed to hug him, exclaiming that she recognized his voice and that it really was Art who had returned to her. Eleanor asked Alice not to cry. When Raymond heard the news, he came home, calling for Art. The old lady showed Art to Alice. Reynold arrived and seeing Art hugged him as well, crying. After that, they sat together and Alice asked Art how he was feeling, mentioning his illness and whether he was fully treated. She noted how thin he looked and asked if he was eating 3 meals a day. Art replied that he was fine. Reynold gently chided Alice for asking so many questions at once and reassured her that they could see how big and strong Art had become. Alice agreed and then asked Eleanor to come and say hi to her big brother. Eleanor, curious about who this big brother was, came closer. Alice explained that this was the brother whose stories their parents had been telling her before bedtime. Eleanor approached and said hello to him. Art shook hands with her and said it was finally time they met. After that, he began to tell them everything from the beginning. While recounting his experiences to his family, he chose to leave out details about Sylvia, explaining his survival from falling off the cliff as a combination of luck and his body's unconscious use of magic to protect him. From there, he continued, finding Tessia and spending time in the kingdom of Elenoir, recovering. Then, Reynold asked about Sylvie. Art explained that while he was travelling, he stumbled into a manor beast's den where Sylvie's mother was dying from an injury. Though he couldn't do anything for Sylvie's mother, he had been taking care of Sylvie since then. Alice asked if he was sure that he was fully healed and if there was any chance of the illness returning. Art reassured her that she didn't have to worry anymore, explaining that his illness had more to do with the instability of his mana core from awakening so early. He felt bad for keeping secrets from them, but until he became stronger, it was dangerous for them to know everything. Reynold asked about the stage of Art's mana core. Alice told Reynold that Art had just arrived and Reynold began discussing mana core stages. Reynold wondered what was wrong with comparing their growth, mentioning that since they arrived, he had been working as the instructor for the Helstia auction house guards. Art joked that it wasn't just Reynold's facial hair that had grown and inquired about Reynold's current mana core stage. Reynold smiled and said he had broken through 2 years ago, entering the dark orange stage. Art thought it was easy to notice that Reynold had bulked up and had advanced to the next stage. He then commented that Reynold must have worked hard but was still acting differently. Reynold asked about Art's mana core stage. Art replied that it was light red. Shocked, Reynolds exclaimed, "Really? Light red? That's amazing." Suddenly, Eleanor repeated the word shit. Alice told Art it was amazing but reminded Reynolds to be mindful of Eleanor before using such language. Reynolds then told Eleanor not to repeat that word again. Reynolds then asked again to confirm, "Are you really at the light red stage? How and when did that happen?" He then suggested to Art, "Let's go to the backyard and spar." Art laughed, thinking to himself that it was good to be back. A man rushed over, asking Reynolds if Art was really alive and what was going on. Art saw the man with his family and realized they were the ones taking care of his own family. Reynolds invited Vin and Tabby to meet his son, who had returned. He introduced Vin to Art, explaining that Vin was running the Helstia auction house and was an old friend of Reynolds, currently working with him. Reynolds asked Art to introduce himself before they started sparring. Art bowed and said he was pleased to meet them, acknowledging that his return might come as a surprise. He explained that he had asked his parents not to tell anyone about his condition and apologized for any confusion. Vin playfully smacked Reynolds and asked Art if he was really related to his father. Reynolds chuckled, saying that he got asked that a lot, but the answer was yes. Tabby told Art it was wonderful to see him back home and then introduced Lilia to Art, hoping they would become friends since they were of the same age. Art smiled at Lilia. Just then, Lilia saw Sylvie and found her so cute. She asked Art if she could touch her. Vin asked about the wrecking his house, and Reynolds explained that he and Art were about to spar. Vin was surprised to hear that. As they got there, Vin saw that they were indeed sparring. They were all in the backyard, with Art standing against Reynolds, both stretching. Alice was talking with Tabby while sitting on the stairs, and Lilia and Eleanor were playing with Sylvie. Vin said to Alice that he couldn't believe Reynolds was serious about Art being a light red core mage. Tabby asked Vin to sit with her. Alice said she was also surprised but mentioned that Art had always been a fast learner and had no reason to hide it. Vin was astonished to believe that an 8-year-old boy had not only awakened but had progressed through 3 stages. Even the genius brats admitted into Cyrus Academy were barely at the dark red stage, and they were 11 or 12 years old. Art thought it might be best not to tell them that he was only at the light red stage because he couldn't train his core while assimilating with Sylvia's beast will. Reynolds hoped that. Art was ready, mentioning that he wasn't the same as before. Art got ready as well, saying that he wasn't like in the past either. Art rushed forward so fast he seemed to disappear, aiming a punch at Reynolds. However, Reynolds blocked the attack and said that Art would have to try harder than that. Art freed himself by kicking Reynolds' hand, and they continued fighting. At one point, Reynolds managed to attack Art, but Art grabbed Reynolds' clothing and threw him away. Reynolds regained his balance by jumping several times. Art asked what Reynolds was thinking. Reynolds replied that it wasn't bad and admitted Art had caught him off guard, but now he was going to be serious. He then made fire rays appear around his hands and said it was a little trick he learned after breaking through to the dark orange stage. He warned Art, telling him not to say he hadn't been warned. Art then thought about the differences in awakening abilities between conjurers and augmenters. In their world, conjurers had the innate advantage of being able to manifest and manipulate their affinity element, while for augmenters, their elemental affinities were more subtle, and actual manifestation of elements only occurred after crossing a certain threshold. Reynolds had fought and trained hard since a young age, but without formal training, it took him until the orange core stage to turn his explosive mana usage into real fire. In Art's world, elements weren't predetermined from birth but rather a path chosen willingly. Talent played a significant role, but since no one was restricted to just one affinity, hard work also mattered. Art had many advantages since coming to this world, and all of them culminated in his current abilities. He then told his father that he had learned 1 or 2 tricks as well. With that, he generated electric waves around him and warned Reynolds not to be surprised by them. Vin was shocked to witness Art's deviation. Art rushed to attack Reynolds, and they began their duel, exchanging blows as they countered each other's attacks. Together, they launched a massive blast that could be seen by people far from them. Reynolds leapt to attack again, but Art blocked it effortlessly. They continued battling fiercely. Art thought Reynolds was living up to expectations, his punches becoming sharper and leveraging his longer reach to keep Art at bay. Dodging one of Reynolds' punches, Art countered with a punch to the bottom of Reynolds' face, stunning everyone watching. Reynolds retaliated with a kick, and then he laughed, acknowledging the new tricks Art had learned. He hugged Art warmly. Art thought about his lightning ability, his most successful deviation, but knew he still had a long way to go. His use of it was unstable, and he hadn't even unlocked the sound or gravity deviations yet. Still, it felt good to impress his parents. Reynolds inquired when Art had learned that, how and what else he knew. Art replied that it hadn't been long ago, and he could barely control it, adding that he couldn't do much else with it yet. Eleanor ran towards Reynolds, asking if he was okay. Alice followed Eleanor, cautioning her to be careful. Vin was so shocked that he asked for something to drink. Tabby commented that Art was truly an extraordinary child. A waiter came to extinguish the grass fire made by Reynolds. Vin and his family left the scene. Hi guys, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy the content.